So if we move to part 2, section 4 now and look at downlights, I mean, I remember when the last version of the wiring rules came out, and that was the big topic. Everyone was talking about it, and I know it caused a lot of headaches. This edition doesn't seem to have as many changes. Is it because the market's settling, or are there other factors of why there haven't been many changes?
Historically, that whole change to downlights happened because of the insulation debacle back with the previous government, and the fires, and also the deaths that occurred in Queensland and I think northern New South Wales. Lost a few people. So there was a lot of work going on with the Lighting Standards Committee, which Dennis and I are both on, to actually rein in recessed luminaires. The international standards for luminaires, the recessed luminaires, didn't actually take into effect Australian installation conditions, and so we had to define a whole lot of new tests to actually make these safer. Now this started out with halogens and incandescent recessed luminaires. In the time that it took us to actually get the standard right, to add classifications, effectively LEDs had taken a big hold of the market, and they run at quite suitable temperatures, lower temperatures. But what we were charged with was bringing in those classifications into the wiring rules that we created in a lighting standard, just so that everybody understood what was going on in the market. So essentially you have those types of luminaires which are marked, which need installation instructions to install, clearances from combustible surfaces. There are IC and IC-4 that don't need those clearances because they're tested in a box full of insulation. So the manufacturer takes the responsibility that product's going to be safe, and it's just installed by the electrician. Doesn't have to worry about clearances.
That's an issue where the pyrolytic temperature limit, which is the temperature where wood or cellulose can ignite under very long exposure to temperature, is actually 105 degrees. You think of paper at Fahrenheit 456 or whatever it was, but when you get long exposure, it's 105 degrees, and so the requirement for ICF or IC4 now is that the case of a downlight can't exceed 90 degrees buried in insulation, and therefore it cannot cause a pyrolytic ignition. So it's just safe. Whereas the incandescent or halogen lamps, they had temperatures up 300 degrees, so they could easily ignite the insulation.
And it's interesting, the market has moved to these IC versions, mainly because the installer doesn't have to worry about clearances. So those other types in the market in general for residential, commercial, they still exist. But anywhere where there's got to be clearances, the electrician doesn't want to know about it because they become liable if they don't do the right thing. So the market itself, as you said, has actually sorted itself out and has pointed in a definite direction. And at the moment we're doing a bit of work from the Lighting Standards Committee to push back onto IEC to say, hey, we found a really good way to put a light into a ceiling. You should be thinking about how you can adopt this as well. So we're actually going back the other way with the
Yeah, we found that the IC standard was deficient because they did tests in a box with insulation around the box, which is not the real world. Our test in Australia is to have a box, but the insulation's in the box, up against the product. And the temperature differences can be 15 degrees, whether it's in a box that's insulated around the box or in a box with insulation in the box. And we're actually working with IEC to get them to adopt the Australian standard, and we go to those meetings and they've now acknowledged that they got it wrong, and so therefore it'll eliminate an Australian variation for downlights. And that's one of the big things that LEDs have done is taking the temperature out of downlights, is because as I said before, there's the two things, electric shock and fire. The shock side of it's pretty well sorted now, I think. And the fire one is the one to attack. And LEDs are a great way to do that because of that 90-degree temperature limit, which is achievable.
Besides the efficiency of the LED itself, it also has implications for the efficiency of the insulation in the house by not having to have great big holes in it.
Yeah.
Correct. From an installation perspective then, are there any kind of changes that contractors need to be across then in regards to recessed luminaires?
No, this is one time where we did actually borrow some stuff from the New Zealand. They actually created these classifications and we carried them across into an Australian New Zealand standard and now put them into the wiring rules. Down the track, those classifications will probably come out of the wiring rules. They're not necessary because the lighting standard does carry all that information. But we just felt that it was important that we go out to our stakeholders and say, well, these are the classifications, these why they exist. Be aware when you go to a wholesaler, they will have marking on the box and on the product.
But there has been, I mean, people tended to go for the cheaper solution and a halogen downlight was cheaper than LED, but there was that risk. Now, you just cannot get a halogen downlight to pass an IC4 rating. Yeah.
You can, I know,
Yeah.
but they're moving
But
towards
basically-
getting rid of
yeah.
incandescent totally.
Yeah.
So.
And also, the cost of LEDs has come down, so the drivers will think they're going to save money by having halogen is gone. So it's a good thing. LEDs have basically sorted a lot of potential problems.